Hi, Nathan Harvey here at the DevOps Talks Conference, and I'm here now with
John Willis.
Bachagalu.
Also known as Bachagalu, yes.
How you doing, John?
Doing good, yeah.
Great. So you just gave this awesome talk, and one of the things that you talked about was a customer that you worked with, and they were comparing incidents and deployments.
Yes.
Can you dig into
I
that
love
a
that,
little bit
yeah.
for me?
Which is funny because, I always stick with sort of Magic 4, right? Lead time, MTTR, which is misnomer, but change success, right? Those are sort of the magical. And there's one guy who did incredibly successful in a sort of a trading desk application, and was an avant-garde in this large bank where everything was slow. And I'd actually been there for a little while, and then somebody tells me this story about this guy. I'm like, wait a minute, how could he be doing like 60 deploys a day when and so I go to meet him, and he talks about like how he literally, the first step is lie. The second step is don't tell anybody what you're doing. But then we got into he talked about metrics, and he was one of us, like these guys that take no bullshit, right? And he says, all you guys talk about lead time. He says, what we did, it was really simple, is we tracked basically the amount of deploys we do, and as they gone up to make sure that the incidents went down.
Okay.
And at first I tried to argue against that, like, no, you can't do that. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is, after the third beer each, right? This is actually the promise of DevOps.
Yeah, for sure.
The promise of DevOps is if we go faster in the right way, the sort of the triangle behavior, then we should actually have less, we get more resilient. And so I was like, wow, that's actually a very simplistic way to just start off and see if your truth is really truth.
Right, so there isn't necessarily a trade-off between that safer and faster. Those two move together.
That's the promise. And again, and by the way, the other thing is, even though sort of lead time and those are not that hard to do, you do have to instrument them.
Sure.
This one is really simple.
Right.
Deploys, and you got a database of incidents, and you don't have to sort of validate even if you stink at incidents.
Right.
Right. But you still can throw those two numbers up and see if they correlate.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was just simplistic brilliance.
Yeah. So speaking of simplistic brilliance, you talk a lot about security theater.
There's nothing brilliant about that.
Security and compliance theater. Well, you said,
I know.
first July, then you don't tell them anything.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, but what are, in your opinion, what are the first steps that we can take to truly move away from security and compliance theater?
Yeah, I think there's you have to look at sort of your toil around governance, risk, and compliance, right? Like in a lot of cases, there's a lot of sort of different compliance bodies that you adhere to, but a lot of it's ITIL, right? And so a lot of things boil down to sort of ITIL being this bear, but it is the only protection mechanism in a large financial institution for GRC. Because you go to the other side in cloud native, there's no story around GRC for that. I mean, there's stuff by Liz Rice about configure, and that's brilliant stuff, but there's no sort of global answer to GRC. So sort of the kind of first thing you kind of have to do is sort of have a reality check about the toil that you do in the name of GRC. And then, so one of the things I forget to do in the presentation is I do this sort of tracer pill.
Okay.
It's beautiful in these places that is sort of mundaned with forms for ITIL and service management. So I take an application, and we sort of trace it. It's not really a value stream map, but it's kind of similar. Like all the steps that you had in the forms you had to fill out for that application. And then I take a recent incident, and we go through the sort of traceability of that incident and try to correlate. And what you find is the person who was sort of the owner didn't get notified till 11 hours into the incident. And you start showing the discontinuity of, there is no real, the service owner is sort of false. You start showing the falsehood of all the stuff you did and then an exact incidents against that service, and you can't connect the dots to any of the real stuff. If you look at an audit, one thing I also do is you ask what happens when you get audited? So you take a modern application that's using CI/CD and go to Amazon and all this, and the audit will say, well, the audit, so we look for four things. We look for the change record, we look for the person who made the change, the time window, and the success of the change, right? And there's none of that matches what went through the CI/CD pipeline.
Of course.
The change window,
all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they checkbox always.
Pretty drafty.
Who made the change? Well, we don't actually go to Git.
Right.
And by the way, we delete the build logs every 5 days. Right. So you literally have zero evidence, and you have this compliance checklist of phoniness of some service owner that gets listed on, you get it, right? Like anybody listening,
Yeah.
and if you've been paying attention too far, you get it. Like it doesn't match the smell test of what you actually, so you have to sort of unravel the smell test. But it's hard because you got to get lots of people in the room, and you got to get them sort of in a get them to the coffee pot discussion where they tell you the real truth.
All right, so to end security and compliance theater, you get everyone in the room together and you give them truth serum.
Yeah,
In the form of coffee.
or you throw somebody annoying like me at them and like ask a gazillion questions until I get the right answer.
All right, John, it's great to catch up with you as always, and please stay tuned for more from the DevOps Talks conference.
Great, thanks, Nathan.
You bet.